Hello and welcome to Rock Your Block and today's segment of This and That with Ernestine. I am your host, Ernestine Wilson. Our returning guest came back to share more information about her journey, married to an NFL player who she believes suffered traumatic brain injuries that contributed to the demise of their marriage and her husband. She has degrees from Stillman College, Savannah State University, and a doctorate from Boston University. Meet my friend, Dr. Jacqueline Wilson Gray. Hi, Jackie.
Hi, Ernestine. How nice it is to see you again.
Good to see you also. So in our last episode, we learned that you were married to NFL superstar and New England Patriots Hall of Famer Leon Gray. And during your marriage and his NFL career, you believe, based on his behavior and medical records, that Leon suffered from the effects of many concussions and CTE. Tell us again what CTE is and give us a brief overview about how it affected your marriage.
Okay, thank you, Ernestine. First, I want to say that I've always been in awe of your intelligence, but now I kind of think you're brilliant to have scheduled this interview today. Today is the National Concussion Awareness Day. And how that came about is in 2019, the Brain Injury Association prompted Congress to enact a declaration declaring one day in September as National Concussion Awareness Day. So this is very appropriate that we would do this today. And back to my marriage, yes, CTE, I believe, was my husband's demise. He was fine. We had a great marriage, as I said before in our last interview. He was a doting father. We had what caused his brain impairment was the concussions that he received over the years that he played. Leon played about 12 years. What happens with CTE is that the brain, whenever you are hit, and like they're tackled in football, the brain releases a substance called tau, T-A-U. That substance destroys the mechanisms in the brain, so nothing works anymore. The afferent, the psychomotor, nothing works well. So he had those repeatedly, and I believe ultimately he ended up with CTE. In the book, I talk about Leon's behavior before the concussions, and I believe that most of his problems started when he had a Achilles tear in Houston. It was his second year there, and it was a playoff game, and he pulled his Achilles and was unable to finish the game. And of course, he was out for the season. He was told that he might not play the next season, but he did. He came back and played and made All-Pro. But anyway, the things that trigger CTE, substance abuse is one of the things, and I think that was something that helped prompted his to be so violent. Anxiety is one of the symptoms. Depression. Leon was very, very depressed. It got worse after he retired. It was bad from the injury because I think he knew that his career was ending. And that must have been a very depressing thing for him. Stress is another thing that brings on CTE. The brain injury that ultimately leads to CTE.
Well, in the book you talk about some of the things that you went through when there was abuse in the marriage. And you backed up your assumptions with empirical data and scientific discovery. Seems like you did a lot of studying. So yes. Why was it important to you to document research and the other things that you discovered?
Well, because I'm an educator and have a trained eye, I knew that high quality data allows for more accurate interpretation of your data. So I wanted to make sure that I had data that was not only valid, but reliable. The second reason is it was for credibility. I wanted to validate my theories with actual thoughts or actual research findings. So I used a textbook approach, and that came about actually with my son. He was taking some therapy for his anger management, and he decided to quit. And when I asked him why, he said he wasn't getting any tools. I said, Mom, I need tools. So that's what put me put my thoughts toward making a textbook. So the book actually is a textbook. I'm going to use that as the main source for the Keys to the Safe training that we want to do for former players. It's a textbook that can be used in higher education classrooms, sport management classrooms, social and behavioral sciences, economics, psychology. There's so many areas where a book like this would be useful as a reference book. One of the things I think is really important to tell you now is that after the first interview, I got a call from a psychology professor who wanted to know if she could use the interview in one of her classes. And of course, I was overjoyed and elated that she was going to do that. So to cause all this, in my approach, I probably was the person that was the case study. But I used a Piaget approach to the book. Piaget studied his own children. I studied my own husband and my own children. So that's how the process began for me.
Well, in the context, could the book Big Ugly Confessions benefit others? See, I've got it right here.
Yes. From the book, you will see that there is a way. I want to make people aware of what concussions and domestic violence is all about. I want to destigmatize the domestic violence perpetrators and victims. And hopefully from that, a significant benefit will become possible for all people that read the book, not only former professional football players. But I say all this in a light of, I'm very sympathetic with players, and I'm very sympathetic with their families, because the older players did not have the opportunity to be in the concussion protocol process. So their issues are probably a lot stronger. So what I would say to those who I would want to benefit is, Lord, forgive us, for we know not what we do.
Well, you also mentioned several reasons why you wrote the book and how the process negatively impacted your life after you left Boston. You write about the phrase ripple effects. Explain to us what you mean by ripple effects and give us some examples, please.
Okay, first of all, let me help you understand that my situation after marriage would not be like a normal person, because Leon was such a high profile athlete. He was adored in Boston. They loved him. Most people would never have believed that he would do some of the things that he did. He was adored, and he had a public face. So the first thing he did was took all the excess from me from vehicles. He even had the police to pick me up one time in our car that we had. So I had no vehicle. I got no child support from Leon. The last time I looked at the records in Boston, he owed me over $500,000. I never got a penny of that. They never honored any restraining orders on him. There was restraining orders and there was court orders for him to pay child support. None of that happened, and he was not forced to do it. With no address or no job for him, evidently, the IRS taxed me for back taxes that he owed. That was, and I remember this figure so well, Ernestine, because I thought I was going to faint when I saw it. $502,000 he owed the federal government. Well, guess who had to pay for it? I ended up having to pay that debt or satisfy that debt over a 10-year period it took me to settle that debt. Now, all this time, Leon is working and doing things, but he was never taxed. I don't know why. And I never even signed the tax returns. The last thing that I want to say is that I developed a lot of health problems. And I didn't realize that I had them until late because they were things that affect you later in life. So I developed a lot of health problems and likely concussions. And as you probably know, many of the victims of domestic violence end up with concussions as well.
Yeah, you do talk a lot about what happens with women or with people who go through domestic violence, especially at home. Um, According to your research, you say that there's a 75% risk that abused women would be murdered while trying to leave the abuser. And you also say that it's not a good idea to tell your abuser that you're leaving. And you say, tell someone if you are in an abusive relationship. And I know that hindsight is 20/20, but my next question is, what was your rationale for not telling anyone? And most importantly, how did you survive those episodes?
I think I mentioned in the last interview that not telling, women are generally very, very embarrassed, as I was. I was ashamed. I didn't want people to pity me. I didn't want to be looked at with pity. I didn't want people to worry about me. But the main thing is, I did not want my son to be exposed in the press. And with Leon's profile in Boston, it was highly likely that that would have ended up blowing up, and not only in Boston, but all over, because he's a football player and it's popular. The situation with me, as I said, would be different simply because he was a professional football player. How I survived implementing the 3 Ps. I prayed a lot. I asked God to help me stay alive to raise my son. Preparation. You have to prepare. I had to prepare. My body was kind of prepared for those knocks and scrapes that Leon gave me because I grew up with 2 of my brothers. They toughened me up. I played basketball. I ran track. I was an athlete. So I could withstand some of the physical pressure that other women might not ever be able to do. So there was some preparation involved. And the last thing was patience. I had to learn how to be patient. I had to learn how to tolerate the treatment that I got from the court. I had to learn to tolerate the treatment that I got from Leon. And I had to decide that I was going to forgive them. And I have not forgiven. That's a journey. I've forgotten, but I have not forgiven.
Wow, it seems like you were abused in a whole lot of different areas, but let's shift gears right now, if you don't mind. You told me that in June of 2023, race norming was removed from the NFL concussion settlement lawsuit. Could you explain race norming and tell us how this policy may affect the families of retired deceased players like your husband, Leon Gray?
Yes, it would affect players like my husband. Race norming has, with the test that they gave the football players to find out if they had concussions or CTE or had CTE, they race normed. They tested, actually the NFL said that black men are different from other people. Their bodies are different. So we're gonna give them a different test. We're gonna score their tests different. We're gonna adjust their test scores for differently because they curve them because they were African American. And some doctors do that now with their patients as well. But this move, when they put the race norming in the stipulation, it affected about 2,000 football players. And of course, most of them were African American. I mean, you know, the league is made up of about 75% black players. So they developed, they used that scale. And when they used the scale, it knocked so many, 2,000 players out of the mix. They couldn't even apply for the benefits. So In June of this year, I think it was, they have removed that stipulation. So at least I've read that at least about 800 players have now qualified for the settlement money because they have removed that racial norming issue. And racial norming that's when they group you according to education and race and culture and things that should not have been done the same, because we were talking about a biological issue. Now they have developed a grid that shows the age, the number of years that the player played, the severity of the concussions, if it's CTE or what comes before. Some of them are strokes, several issues that a player can have, and all of those are designated with some funds that the players can now get. So now over 1,000 of those 2,000 are going to get paid, which is wonderful. I am so pleased for them. And I know it sounds like I'm a little partial and I'm sympathetic to the former players. I am, because I was one of them, and I know that the concussion protocol was not in existence, and it might have been something that would have helped me in my marriage. So I am sympathetic, and I pray that some of the young people who are in the NFL now have take advantage of that protocol and use it the way it's supposed to be used.
Okay, thank you. How did you come up with the title Big Ugly Confession?
Well, I knew most women would not know this, but Big Ugly is the nickname for offensive linemen. Leon was big, but he wasn't ugly. And there are some big ugly offensive linemen. But anyway, the word confession, that changed 4 or 5 times. The only thing, Ernestine, that I thought reminded me of what was in my book was Back to the Future. Couldn't use that title, of course, but all I could think about was the fact that concussions were not getting better. Concussions have been in existence since tackling was added to football in 1888. So it's been around a long time, and it's not going anywhere. So that's how we came up with it. Big Ugly is a nickname for offensive linemen, and the confession was changed many, many times, but I finally used the term because my editor actually said that's what I should use, and I kind of listened to Phyllis. So that's how that came about.
Okay, got it. So I'm going to ask you a question, and the answer is yes or no. You ready?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Do you believe the concussion issue will be solved with all the things that you mentioned, like new uniforms, new helmets, new shoes, and rule changes?
No.
And why do you answer no?
I say no because they're still having concussions in the NFL, over 200 per season sometimes. The key to it is that the reason that it won't go away is because football is too popular and it's too profitable. That is why the program, like the Keys to the Safe that I've written, makes sense. We need to do something because football isn't going anywhere. I think that we have to do what we can to make sure that we get better treatment and better service programs for people who have been affected. To give you an example, I looked at some research that said that 85% of the NFL players said they would play in a Super Bowl with a concussion. How in the world is football going anywhere? Also, they were they felt like that it would never be a problem for them if they continued to play after they had a concussion. So if they would play in the Super Bowl with a concussion, what can we do? It's not going anywhere. And can you blame them? I don't think so.
Yeah, we all do love turning on the TV on Sunday or Monday or Thursday and watching those games. You've designed a non-medical concussion maintenance seminar for players and families. And you have programs on concussion education boot camps for youth football programs. Tell us how these programs were developed.
The non-medical concussion maintenance program, Keys to the Safe, is what I designed for former players. That was designed for players like my husband. I knew that them and their families had not gotten the kind of attention that the players are getting now with concussions. They need something to be able to maintain their, they need to be able to maintain their anxiety without their emotions controlling them. We need to continue to put those kinds of programs together, particularly for former athletes, football players. The retired football players boot camp is for the younger children. That's for people, community agencies and schools where football programs are in education, and where they can, kind of programs that can be held to reduce or actually to comply with what the law says must happen. So when my group, I had a team of people to work with me in putting these together, and peer review type and development, psychologists, a healthcare professional, sports management people, evaluators, and two retired NFL players. Well, they came to the conclusion that not only could this program work for football players, but it would also work for individuals who have aggressive behavior. There are a lot of areas, even in business, not necessarily in the physical sports, but in business, you've got a lot of people with aggressive behavior that could use the kinds of things that we put together. So I was fortunate enough to have some great people who could help me to make sure that I had included all those things that was necessary in order for people to learn how to manage their emotions.
Well, what is the most important takeaway in the book for victims and perpetrators?
You know, Ernestine, I think that when I started out, I really wanted it to be factual. Then I thought about it. I said, what I want to really do is change the mindset. I want a different mindset about concussions. Instead of the doom and gloom conversations that we learn, I promote the elimination of sadness and the concentration on inspiration. I want to see more inspiration for research, inspiration for better medical care, inspiration for treatment, inspiration for education, and finally, funds to run programs that will help former football players and others in our community. Remember, this is so important. 10 million children witness domestic violence a year. If you multiply those numbers times their spouses and the children that they have, we've got an epidemic proportion situation here. We've got to do something about it. And I'm pushing for inspiration to get the things that we need to get it done and get the attention that we need for education and awareness.
Well, what organizations or individuals have been the most supportive in sharing data or helping you with anything else you needed to promote the programs that you developed?
Well, if you remember, during the time I was writing the book, the concussion issue was in court. They were having a lot of conversation all over the country. When Omalu, the man who discovered it, his career was destroyed. It was a lot going on with concussions during that time. It was like pulling teeth, trying to get information from some people. But anyway, the people that the National Domestic Hotline, for instance, the NFL donates millions of dollars to them every year. But I don't believe that players' wives will call the domestic violence hotline if they needed help. I just don't think they want that public. Mm-hmm. The CDC helped a lot. The National Institute of Health, the Brain Injury Society, the National Federation of Educators of High Schools, the National Library of Medicine, the Retired Players Alumni. Now, the Retired Players Alumni Associations, they were unbelievably kind and reached out and told me that they sent the letters that I sent to them to the wives. They were so kind. Many of them have reached out to me since to find out how things are going. So I think they appreciate the fact that somebody is concerned about their well-being as well. As I said, but it was like pulling teeth.
Wow. Well, you've done a really good job of bringing attention to what's going on with concussions and also highlighting problems that families endure when there's domestic abuse in the house. So that's great. Well, guess what? Our time is up. So, if you have any questions about how to contact our special guest, Dr. Jacqueline Wilson Gray, please see the information scrolling below. Thank you for watching Rock Your Block and today's segment of This and That with Ernestine. See you next time.